Hello. A little bit of about my background. I'm information designer, motion media maker, so a little bit close to you, but also psychologist and educator. An interesting thing I encountered within my last research was a visitor notion called visitor experience. There's much more and more emphasis put on it. We do not operate with separate definition for visitor experience. A part of user experience, so the full interaction of the end user with the company and its services and products, but we enter a totally different niche. Niche of cultural organizations and especially museums. So this is kind of a new market, and what is a museum actually? The museum is a great spatial interface that mediates the art and artist's thoughts with the user, the visitor. It's a kind of specific user. For me, that also provides a fantastic aesthetical experience. That's what people are going to the museum. Unfortunately, we observe that within the last years, museums are becoming more and more empty. And some of them are reporting that only 3% of their visitors are passing by their permanent exhibition. Well, these are numbers, for example, from Poland. Where you can see that within 5 years, just before the crisis, the numbers of visitors for cinema raised of 60%. The frequency for galleries and museums stood still. Well, this is kind of alarming message. The average age of the audience is rising up. So within some statistics of the museums, 65% of respondents are of age 50 and more, and only 18% are the parents with minor children. So why? Where is the new generation? Are we losing them? I think they are still there. They are just talking a little bit different language. They are digital natives, and they are using different props. Their experience as users changing according to social and technological developments, and so should do the museum design. We should move it a bit forward to meet the new needs, new attention span, and also reach the new channel of communication of the new generation. But I was thinking about it, maybe actually nothing has really changed. We should actually get to know the new visitor and get him into the context of today. And we should try to change the obstacles into the opportunities. And how to define those both, how to define obstacles and opportunities. I'm proposing psychological framework, a couple of psychological theories to track the human behavior and to track the human needs and motivations to understand their expectations. I'll tell you about a couple of cases that I was involved in lately. As a psychologist involved in media, for example, we embedded 3D printing within the guided tours in a museum. Well, 3D printing is not much fancy anymore, but for us it was kind of a visionary way of participating, let people participate in co-creation. Let's make them making art, co-create art, and we know that once we are creating, we are much more focused and we learn much more, so the educational value of the museums is raised. The end goal was the self-sustainability of the museum, because once we create extended visit of the museum, once we cause a secondary visit and we rise the educational value of the museums, we are also rising frequencies and statistics of the museum. That's much important. That's much important for applying for states funding. And for the sponsors, well, we create actually a new group of sponsors that might be interested in original exposure and new identity. So how would it work? Well, I bet many of you were trying at least once to explain to a kid what art is by handing a book, for example. But wasn't then the museum experience suddenly changed into a book experience and not always that satisfactory? What we said, look, just choose your favorite artwork, favorite character, and make your own character design. Remake it, recreate it via 3D application and let it print it out via 3D printer placed in a museum and take it home. It's a kind of extension of the visit. But it's not only about having, it's also about watching the creation process that is actually missing in a museum. And believe me, this is as much fascinating as watching painter during his act. Well, the second case, we were thinking if people are not coming to our collections, let's bring our collection to the people. Let's ask the street artist to translate the visual code of the whole boring, sometimes, collections into the new visual language that young people understand. Let's make the city the big art house. I'll make a tour and invite the natural visitors, the citizens of the city, to reach in a new way the heart of the art, which is the museum themselves. And believe me, there is nothing much more satisfactory than matching the correspondent items by yourself once you know them already. In case 3, we were thinking about the layout and the design inside the museum. We were thinking how to make the images speak to the people, how to make them interactive, how to immerse visitors in our messages, how to create our environment more responsive, how to tell the stories that our visitors can interact with or have an impact upon. And what occurred is that once they can tell the story together with us, they just become a part of the story. And they belong actually to us, to our community. And what about other issues that we still have to handle? So I'm asking you for later talk, if you have any ideas how to help, how to reach blind people as our target group, cultural minorities. How about experimental approach for art, performance as art? How to keep our old collections relevant to upcoming events? How to make people interact with each other, to make the experience within the museum more social? And how to immerse, how to get people into the flow, like in a cinema. Well, curators have not always that convinced, they are not always that convinced towards innovations and experimenting, but well, I'm thinking they shouldn't lose too much time for searching because the visitor might be just gone and the information is just there. Just use your frontline stuff because they have first-hand observation information. They do know well how behave people who are searching for one-to-one experience, those who are coming within a more social context, those who are coming with large quantities or just with their families, people of different age, the young ones who need some stimulation to get engaged and have an interaction with the content of the museum, and those who really need to be entertained. Well, we do have information about target groups. This is a totally different conversation, but I would like to concentrate on Generation Y. Sorry for typing for mistake, millennials, and Generation Z, so those who will be next year 16 years old. Well, according to Volk and Dierking, the visitor experience is composed of 3 different contexts: personal one, social one, and a physical one. But I would like to ask more fundamental question. Is art experience a part of museum experience, or should we treat it apart? The art experience, the individual dialogue with artwork, and a museum experience as interface. We know as psychologists that once people are coming to the museum, they are expecting to fulfill one of their needs: cognitive one, affective one, or behavioral one. And even Walt Disney knew that to learn us something, to affect our behavior, he needs to entertain us, so to include certain emotional factor. And only then, if we understand that those 3 factors overlap with each other, we can ask ourselves why the visitor is coming to our place, what does he need, what is he looking for, and what does he expect, what should happen during this visit and after the visit. The goal of my research is to identify the patterns of the behavior and motivation of the visitors, to facilitate the exploration and to enhance the museum experience. And now I will present you 5 frameworks, psychological frameworks that I propose as basis for further research about visitor experience. So spatial attention, for example, we use different cues, we distinguish different cues to allocate the viewer's attention. It can be low level, like a visual or auditory, or high level, like social, interactive, more abstract ones. But let's focus on visual ones, the simplest, I suppose. How do we orient the visitor within the physical space of the museum? By contrast, lighting, motion. How the sequence of the items that the visitor is spotting, is watching, is affecting the reading of the content, the meaning of the content, and how the visual entourage is rooting me and pacing my own motion, which is just huge effect on my visitor experience. What about objects and labels? How descriptive they should be and how much reflection should they instigate? That has also enormous effect on meaning that I will get. What about design and display? Shall I perceive museum as a gestalt environment, the wholeness, or shall I focus my attention to particular items? What about ergonomics, about barriers and way showing? Shall we crowd people more together, or shall we lead them individually their individual way? Well, therefore, we have to work with the whole palette of designers, motion, spatial, audiovisual ones, because they are actually the actual guides through our museum as an interface. Gestalt can be considered within a museum on different levels. Just to give an example, museum is Gestalt, as I said, Volkan Dürking perceived museum as the wholeness that I'm entering. A museum for Gestalt, for example, museum in Zurich, that is exhibiting the works, the Swiss style of Gestalt school. Gestalt revision is talking about translating Gestalt school for aesthetics, more theoretical level, and I'm willing to use the Gestalt visual principles to lower the cognitive load of the visitors. The cognitive load, which people are sometimes complaining on. Gestalt is saying that we can chunk and group visual items together so that we read the content in a much better way. This is the whole branch of research, so this is also for another talk. But similarly, cognitive level theory is saying, for example, that we can prime or activate appreciation of art on a more abstract or concrete level, dependently on activating more distant or close mental, so more wider or closer mental distance, or within a temporal way, in a temporal way, or the distant way, more social or hypothetical. Well, this is also a bit for another conversation, but just to let you know that our cognitive judgments, as you know, they are not always that logical, and we have the whole palette of biases that we should take into account while trying to foresee the people's judgment of art, and also the opposite effect, the huge effect of emotion on knowledge acquisition. I mentioned co-creation and the participatory effect. According to Hawthorne effect, just because the fact that we are being watched, and obviously in a museum we are being watched at least by our co-visitors, we are performing better. As simple as that. While we are performing better, we are learning much better, and we get much more satisfaction from our visit. That means that we have much higher chance to get into the flow. About the flow I will tell in a second, but for that we need to adjust our physical context of the museum. We have to adjust the props that are being used there according to new technologies. We should educate our leaders and guides, and also ask ourselves how much co-creation is actually okay for the museum. The flow. Well, as much as in a cinema, we want to get our visitors into the kind of flow, so the total absorption of their activity. And this is kind of a definition of flow, especially when during this activity, person is developing a skill needed to perform such a task. So it's kind of a learning process that we are getting satisfaction from. To get persons, our visitors, into the flow, we need to instigate their intrinsic interest in the content of the museum, raise their curiosity, focus and lead their attention, and also give them a sense of control and feeling of control, mastering on the action that they are performing. And once the goals are clear, the challenge is balanced with their skills, and person is giving a time to focus and act upon his task under control and awareness, he has a huge chance to get self-rewarded, and that's what we want. So rounding up, improve mediation of art via museums. So the new interface, spatial interface between the user, visitor, and the content means art. We can use a lot of psychological frameworks and measurements to track their behaviors, attention spread, mental insights, also on the motivation and needs. And via those measurements, we can reach actually much higher goals that is reaching new public, becoming a city, the local place, the part of the city's identity, to shorten the mental distance between the museum and the everyman, to make the museum much more understandable, become a part of the personal network of the people, and what is most important, to follow the new social trends. So I would like to thank all the partners that are supporting my project, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you.